Yeah, welcome back to another episode of Patrolling in Paradise, the podcast. We're so glad to have you guys back. Once again, my name is Chris.
I'm Gabriella.
And we are the public information team of your Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. We're happy today to be joined by Lieutenant Howard Nuzum from our corrections facility. How's it going, Lieutenant?
It's another great day.
Another great day. We're glad you're here. When's the last time you got to have a sit-down meeting with somebody from the corrections facility?
It's been a minute, like an official meeting like this where I actually get to pick your brain. It's been a while, so this is cool.
Well, it's a first for me, so it'll be a good time.
It's definitely a rare opportunity. You guys stay pretty busy over there, so to have you step away from that for a little while and come over and join us for the silliness that we like to get into here on the podcast, we appreciate you swinging by, sir, for sure. So, why don't you kick us off?
So tell us about how Lieutenant Howard Nuzum started out, how you got into corrections.
So I started at the prison here in Charlotte County back in 2004. I ended up moving over here to Charlotte County Jail in 2006. And I started like everybody else did. I went into a housing unit and worked in housing for about a year, became a training officer. And I got really interested in intake. They get to move around a lot, get to see a lot of arrests come through, and got interested in doing that. So I put in to become an intake deputy and spent a decade in intake, off and on, but for the most part of a decade in intake. And started working my way through, and I had a young child, and they came to me at like year 4 or 5 and said, "Hey, are you ready to be a supervisor?" And I said, "I'm not ready." I said, "I've got a young kid, but I will be when he turns 5 years old." And I had a great supervisor who wrote that down. And at the 5-year mark, to the day, my phone rang.
Oh.
And he said, "Hey, are you ready to be a supervisor?" And I said, "I mean, I guess." And he said, "Well, let's get you started. You told me 5 years. I'm going to hold you to it."
That's
and
awesome.
I said, "All right." So
Wow.
I put in my paperwork that day and ended up taking the next test. And, I made corporal. Was fortunate enough to stay on days for a couple years as a corporal and trained under some great supervisors, and ended up going to nights. And as a corporal, I worked almost every squad, days and nights. And then I finally got to day shift for a while, got bumped back to nights, as it happens. Mm-hmm. But I went to intake as a supervisor, which that was fantastic. You have a much smaller group to supervise. Like in housing, you'll have 20 officers, but in intake, you see 7. Mm-hmm. So you can be a real part of their life. You get to they talk about span of supervision and how many people you can effectively supervise. Having 7 people, what's going on in their lives, sure, how they are as an officer. So that was fantastic. And I was very familiar with the job. So I could walk out there and tell them, "Hey, this is why we do what we do. This is how we do what we do. And this is what happened in the past that changed policy to the way it is now." Mm-hmm. So I did that. I had a very tenured sergeant in intake that kind of walked me through everything, even some of her job as a sergeant. And I wanted to be a sergeant. I wanted to get through it. So when the position became available, I tested, and I was moved to sergeant in housing on night shift. And I did my time there, and I moved to day shift, and I lucked out and was assigned to Lieutenant Christensen. And we had a fantastic squad. He has a ton of experience, great teacher. And he said, the moment that I made sergeant, he's like, "I'm not going to teach you to be a sergeant. I'm going to teach you to be a lieutenant, and we're going to go from there." And I said,
"Wow.
All right." It's scary, but I said, "All right." We ended up having 2 fantastic corporals, and we kind of passed that down. I'm not going to teach you to be a corporal when you come over. I'm going to teach you to be a sergeant. And since then, all of us have moved up, and it's been fantastic. So I went to night shift as a lieutenant, and was fortunate enough to bring one of my corporals with me as a new sergeant. And we took over night shift, and we've had a great experience. It was interesting to kind of become, the head of a squad, so you could see, what you want to see. And people always told me coming up, even if you have somebody that's a bad trainer, you learn what not to do. Mm-hmm. So some of the best lessons I ever got was from people that, maybe not necessarily taught me the best thing in the world, but I learned I'm not going to do that moving up. So I took those experiences. I had a sergeant that was very much on the same page, And we've been bringing up, night shift is full of very young officers, and we've been bringing them up. Get them to as much training as they can, scenario-based training, run-and drills, so that they know coming up what to expect and how to be better officers and how to be better educated. We push education with Charlotte County, and if that had been started when I was 20 years old, I wouldn't be doing it when I'm 40.
Right.
So that's what we want for them.
That's incredible. I mean, and what I'm hearing through that entire story is you had great leaders.
Yeah.
And that taught you to be a great leader. And to hear you now say that, okay, yeah, I'm passing that down to the young deputies on my squad, that just, it gives me chills. That's awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah, the future, I was asked one time, what's the most important position in the sheriff's office? And it's being a training officer. No matter how much money you make, no matter what rank you're in, training the next generation is the most important position there is, because that's who's coming up behind us, right. and will be our next generation.
Such a great outlook, such a positive, forward thinking. A lot of people, they get into a career and they have that mentality of, what do I want to accomplish in my career? What have I done? Look at me, look at what I've accomplished. And when I retire, what can I look back on and say, I did that? But I think that what you guys have going on over there at the jail is it's a cyclical thing. It's you're bringing up the next people to say, look what they're going to do. And they're going to do the same thing when they're moving into your positions of leadership, into your lieutenant roles and things of that nature. So it's a really cool thing to hear you talk about it. And I know that you are a very prideful person in what it is that you do, which is why you have this expertise that we wanted to tap into here today. You've been over there in the Charlotte County Jail now for almost 20 years. And you have, over that time, built an incredible knowledge of gangs and gang-related, everything related to gangs and how they come through our jails and things of that nature. So I really want to tap into that today, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've heard one of your presentations at our Citizens Police Academy, and the information you shared was awesome. I mean, it was so cool to see and to hear with photos, and obviously we can't give photos to our listeners, but we can definitely tap into some of that knowledge. So let me just start with a simple question, or maybe it's not as simple as I think it is, and you'll let me know. How many gangs do we actually have in Charlotte County?
So it's an interesting question. We don't have gangs functioning in Charlotte County as you see on TV. What we have is people that grew up in Charlotte County or people that lived in Charlotte County that got arrested and went to prison, and they'll end up joining a gang in prison. And then when they get released, they come back home, and now they're gang members from their affiliation in prison. But they're not acting as gang members or committing crimes in the name of their gang here in Charlotte County, or at least not that I've seen or there's any pattern of.
Okay.
So I grew up in Southwest Detroit. That's what got me interested in gangs to begin with. Gangs was part of elementary school coming up. Like, we saw that coming up. And when I moved out of Detroit and moved down here, I was trying to get away from that. So I was going around looking for graffiti, looking for areas that were tagged up, looking for people wearing gang colors and stuff like that. And when I came here to Charlotte County, I didn't see that.
Right. So now you go to the jail and you're seeing signs of that, but you're clarifying that because you're seeing those people with gang markings, for example, tattoos and brandings and things of that nature, that doesn't mean that they're a gang that's operating in Charlotte County. It's a gang member that happens to be in the Charlotte County Jail. Correct. Okay. So that's an important distinction that I think we need to make. So looking at, let me reword the question then. On any given day, how many people would you say are in our jail that have some kind of gang affiliation, even if it's a percentage? Can you give us a roundabout?
It's about 50. What we see is somewhere between 50 and 60 inmates that have some kind of tie to a gang. Either they're a documented gang member, or they're an associate of a gang, or they have gang tattoos. Our normal house counts somewhere between 700 and 900, or 600 and 900, and we see around 50 on an average.
Is it, so you said that they go to prison, they join a gang, they come back home, Charlotte County, and so now they're affiliated with that gang. Have you been able to pinpoint, why are they joining these gangs when they're in prison?
There's a lot of different schools of thought to that. When people join a gang and you ask them on the streets, they say because they don't have family. And you'll see a lot of references to this if you watch gang documentaries. You know, there's single family home, or both parents are at work and no one's at home, or there's no money at the house. So they end up going home from school and they'll hang out with people that are associated, and they're saying, hey, you know, I can help you out. I know your family's poor or something. Let me help you out. And they end up building that camaraderie within the gang that they miss at home. So you see it in prison. I think it to be a different story. In prison, it's mostly for safety. You know, if you go to prison as a young Caucasian male and you look at the statistics for the demographics in prison, you're largely outnumbered by Hispanic and African Americans. So to go there, you'd be prey. So a lot of them will join white supremacist group or any number of gangs that are in the prison for safety. There's safety in numbers.
Okay. So just kind of getting involved with other people just for the sake of saying these people have my back.
Right.
Okay. All right. And so we find them in the Charlotte County Jail. And now your knowledge of the different gangs and the way that we identify them, can you talk a little bit about how do we identify the gangs that they're affiliated with?
So every inmate that comes into the jail during the booking process gets their photographs taken. And that includes, you know, their profile and their mugshot, but it also includes any tattoos that they may have in any, you know, obviously in an appropriate location that they can be photographed. But over the years, myself and my team have developed an understanding of gang tattoos. Of course, they're ever changing, so that's an uphill battle. But I check every inmate, every tattoo that comes into the jail, which is a lot.
Yeah.
But that's why I have a team now. I'm not doing it by myself. But we see tattoos, and some gangs are really good at hiding tattoos. You know, some of the gangs use tattoos that are common. You know, I'm sure we've seen like Michael Jordan's the Air Jordan pose, but it's red and black. Or you'll see his number 23, so they'll have that tattooed on them. 2, 3 together is 5, and 5 is a blood number. So, but is everybody that's a Michael Jordan tattoo on them a gang member? No,
Right.
Obviously not.
Wow.
But we'll see guys that have Michael Jordan, and then on their back, they'll have bloods or blood member across their back, or the name of their set displayed across their back. We also conduct searches of the cells in the jail. There has to be 5 searches conducted in every unit on every shift. So we're looking for gang paraphernalia in the cells. So you're looking for graffiti, either on the walls, on the bunks, or on any documentation that's in the unit or in their cell. I've seen art that's been made to display their gang affiliation, or they'll mark cups or bowls or anything that they can to show their affiliation.
Are you finding a lot of, and I'm sorry, Gabriella, jump in anytime.
No, go ahead.
Are you finding a lot of people that come in and they claim some kind of gang affiliation, but you don't really see any evidence of that? Like, I can walk in and say I'm a white supremacist, but how do you know that I'm not actually a white supremacist?
So we're not labeling gang members. We're going by association or what your tattoos are. But if you come in and tell me that you're a gang member, then you are. I'm going to treat you as such because you're going to perpetuate yourself in the unit as one.
Sure.
So if you're going in the unit and tell 60 inmates, I'm a blood, they're going to treat you as such.
Okay.
You know, if he has any rivals in the unit or any rival gangs in the unit, if he identifies as one, they're going to treat him as one. Now, I can go through his social media. I can go through his previous bookings. I can look at all of his tattoos. I can sit down and talk with him. I can have one of my people sit down and talk with him and say, you know, you told them during your classification that you were X, Y, and Z. Can you tell me about it? And some people will. Some people will go on and on about it. Some people won't. But the point is if they tell you that they are, then they'll be treated as such.
Okay. That makes sense.
So this is all just really fascinating to me. So I'm sitting here like a sponge. But if they identify themselves as a gang member, or if you discover them to be affiliated with a gang, I heard you bring up classifications. How does that play into where they go from intake?
So in the prison was a different story. There was a large amount of gang members percentage-wise. If you think about it, in the jail right now, I think our count's at 600. 50 inmates is not a huge number. You know, so our jail doesn't differentiate based on gang affiliation, and we don't have. Matter of fact, we have very little, if any, gang issues within the jail. So what we see is a lot. They associate here in jail, and then it doesn't become a big issue until they get to prison, and then they'll separate because there's so much delineation in the prison that you can't associate with rival gang members. But in the jail, you're only there for such a short amount of time that they just associate as needed, or they'll just keep their distance.
Mm-hmm.
So do you tend to keep an eye on their behaviors still?
So if we monitor all mail in and out of the unit, all messages, all photographs, all phone calls in and out of the unit with keyword. So if I have a list of keywords that go into all their mail. So if you hear gang or if you hear folk nation or blood, anything like that, it sends me an email and I see it so I can read it. Same with all my officers, not just the ones on my team. Every officer that's in the jail knows what they're looking for. So if they hear somebody that's perpetuating themselves as a gang member, there's an incident report completed about it, that's what they do. And that gets sent to me or my team, and we look through it and see, are they a member? Are they an associate? And are they acting in the name of the gang? Are they just showing out? Are they just saying this to get clout in the unit? Mm-hmm. Or is this something to be concerned about? Now, you can be a gang member, get into a fight, and it has nothing to do with your gang membership.
Sure.
So you need to find out the difference. Like, is this person acting as a gang member, or are they acting as an inmate, as an individual?
Okay.
Wow.
So because I know you, and I know that you could talk gangs all day long.
All day.
And never run out of material.
I could listen all day.
Right. It's super interesting. But I do want to turn the page a little bit and talk some more about some of the other things that you do over in corrections, over at the Charlotte County Jail. And I think that there's a stigma that goes with, people that are in jail, and they're all bad people because they're in jail. And I know that that's not the case, and I know that in the Charlotte County Jail, we've worked with people that have either been really good people who just made a bad choice once, or they could just be in a rough situation. So when we get those kinds of people, what kind of programs do we have to help them to make sure they don't come back into our jail?
So we offer any array of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, GED, educational programs. We have a reentry program to help people get, when they get out, to have housing, to have transportation. We're going to be starting on getting their driver's license or identification, all of that stuff to help them while they're in the facility. But one of the things a supervisor 20 years ago told me in intake, remember that when you meet somebody in intake, you're meeting them on their worst day, the worst day of their life. So you have to give it, a little bit of space. People come in angry, people come in drunk, people come in upset, but they've either been taken out of their home, or they've been arrested and are in fear of losing their job, or it's an uncomfortable situation for everybody. So you try to give them as much space as you can safely. I've talked to people, they come in, they're mad. I said, listen, I understand you're mad. I get it. Nobody wants to go to jail, but you're here. So I have a job to do. I know you don't want to be here, but let's get through this together. We'll get you on the phone. Most people want to get a hold of their wife or their husband and let them know, their kids, what's going on. And most of it is the unknown. They don't understand the process. How long does it take to get through? How long till I can go home? When do I see a judge? Sure. Most of that, if you can get people calm down long enough to answer some of their questions, you can take someone that's escalated to a 10, that's ready to have a fight or assault somebody, and bring them down to a 2, as long as you just are patient and explain the process to them. Now, that doesn't mean that's everybody. There's people that are hell-bent on being a 10, and they're going to stay a 10. Oh, well, okay, we have an answer for that too. But most people aren't that way. Most people are just upset because they don't like the situation and they don't understand it, and you can get them through it. I've even said to people, listen, I know a road deputy brought you here. I'm not a road deputy.
Right.
It's my job to keep you here. No, I didn't bring you here. And a lot of people will laugh. sometimes you sit down and talk football because you have to get off the topic.
Mhm.
And once people they see us as cops, and they think we see them as inmates. If you can see each other as human beings, usually you can de-escalate the situation.
That's awesome. I love to hear that because anybody can make a mistake. We make mistakes every day, and sometimes they're big mistakes, and people end up in jail. But to sit down on their level and talk to them like a human, that's so important. And I'm sure that plays an even bigger role when they go home, because they can say for that time when they had that conversation with you, I was treated like a human being. I wasn't treated like a number.
Something that I wasn't ready for when I came here to the Charlotte County Jail, and in intake, when you see people get arrested, is people getting out of the car and thanking the deputy for arresting them.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
I was like, I pulled the inmate aside afterwards. I'm like, did you really thank the deputy that arrested? He's like, yeah, absolutely. He said, I needed to be here.
Wow.
He goes, and not only did I need to be here, but he treated me like a human the whole time. And he goes, and I've been places where they didn't. He said, and I broke the law. I knew I broke the law. He's doing his job. I'm going to jail. But he didn't make it harder than it needed to be. And we've had those same experiences in the jail. And we've had people write in afterwards and said, I know nobody wants to be in jail, but, it wasn't the worst experience I've ever had. And some people really treated me well. And I learned a lot of things. And I won't be back. We tell people all the time, they'll say, I want to thank you. I said, don't thank me. Just don't come back.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved seeing you, but I don't want to see you again.
Right. Yeah.
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 I know that we had kind of on that topic, we had a deputy last year who an inmate came through who was struggling with drug addiction.
Mhm.
She was bad, had to give up her child, and it was a real bad situation. And she asked for deputy, and I don't know if she was a DFC. I apologize. I don't know your rank. Bodette
Mhm.
to actually attend the day that she graduated from drug court. And she got herself cleaned up, and she had a new baby.
Yeah.
And she asked Deputy Bodette to be there. And Bodette told her at the time, she said, yeah, of course I will. And of course, this is after she's been out of jail now. She's completed the programs. And the day that she was in drug court, Bodette did go. She did go to that graduation. And that young lady walked over and gave Bodette a huge hug and thanked her and said, when everything went down, you were the only person that said to me, you can turn this around. She said, even my family had given up on me, but you, the corrections deputy, said, you can do this. Let's do it together.
People don't understand the amount of time we spend with inmates. If you consider that we work 12-hour shifts, you're with that person of that 12 hours, probably 10 hours. Sometimes you're the only person they talk to.
Mhm.
And we have a bigger influence on the inmates than most people understand. So the amount of time that you spend with somebody, you walk a fine line between building a rapport and building a friendship. Because for the officer's safety, you have to draw that line.
Right.
It's not that you don't care or that you don't want to see people succeed, because you do. But we have to be careful on manipulation as well.
Sure.
Yeah. But the road deputies, they arrest them, they bring them in. That's what, a couple hours,
Yeah,
if that.
a couple hours.
And then you guys are spending day after day until they get out. That's going to leave an impression. They're going to remember you.
Yeah, I've 20 years in a jail. I've known these inmates, and we see a lot of the same inmates. The recidivism rate at times can be high. And I've known them for 20 years. So when they come in, they'll treat me like, oh, hey, hey, Nuzum, how's it going? How you been? And my wife works in a jail, so they know that. So they're like, oh, how's the wife and stuff? And, I try to be as cordial and kind as I can be, keep it short, but they're doing good. I'm sorry to see you back in here. And a lot of times, sometimes it's just taking a couple minutes to listen to somebody, and that's really all they want.
Yeah. You have such an ability to have a huge impact on them as a person. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. So I'm glad that you shared some of that with us. Speaking of huge impacts, I want to transition here to a lot of the programs that we run with the Community Affairs Unit, things like our Shop with a Cop program, our Cops and Goblins program. We do these things for the community. And a lot of the times in the past, the correction staff kind of got left out of those things. But I've seen over the last couple of years at least a huge representation from the jail staff, from your units specifically. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that inspiring stuff comes about?
So I didn't do it as a younger officer. And, looking back at it, I wish I would have. You'll hear people say that, corrections doesn't see the light of day because we're locked down all the time. So Shop with the Cop is really what got me started. I went to my first Shop with the Cop and taking a child out, seeing their family, seeing their parents. And a lot of people don't, when they see a corrections officer, they're not happy. You're in jail, you're in prison. You don't get to see a lot of the good stories. So to go out and be in public and to walk a child around and help them get Christmas gifts and and to see admiration and to see them talk about, oh, I want to be a cop when I grow up, or and ask, what do you do? And I say, I work in a jail, and they didn't even know that was a job. So we're trying to explain that to them, and we talk with the parents, and they're like, oh, thank you. Maybe they weren't going to be able to afford a Christmas or something like that, and it was super rewarding. So when I came up through the ranks, I started pushing that. It's like, hey, I realize getting out in your Class A's in 100-degree heat isn't fantastic. It's rough, but go and get this experience, because sometimes your positivity tank can run low in corrections. Here's a chance to get to fill it for a little while, and then I found Cops and Goblins, which is a lot of fun. You're in uniform. Yeah, you're in with a lot of people, but it's smiling kids, it's smiling parents. It's a lot of fun. It's not being in jail. It's being out in the public and doing fun things. Night shift has a lot of younger men and women. I think my median age on night shift is like 25.
Oh, wow.
So you go to them and say, hey, we're going to go. You can dress up if you want to. You can wear your uniform if you want to, but let's go pass out candy to kids. And they're about it.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go. And, the Cops and Goblins events has been in the mall, so it's air conditioned. So everybody, like, yeah, that's great. We're going to go outside. We're going to go inside the air conditioning, hand out, candy, and there's some fun events there. People are taking pies to the face, and we got great photographs of that stuff. And the more we did it, the more fun it became. The more people saw it. They're like, oh, I want to do that. I'll go to the next one. I'll go to the next one. So, we kind of make it a competition, especially Cops and Goblins for raising candy. And, cops are competitive. It's what we do. So the more you can make it a competition, the more you can make. And, you tell people, like, oh, it shouldn't be about competition. No, it's about the kids. It is. But if the competition spurs the candy, well, by God, that's what we're going to do. So, we're talking trash to other squads and to road patrol and, trying to get their numbers up too. Like, I want to win, but I want the kids to win.
Sure.
And I have a sergeant on my shift, Sergeant Osinga and Corporal Leonard, that just adopted this program. And they're like, man, this is what I will do this every year. I'll spearhead it. I'll find the candy. We'll get after it. And they do. They do.
As somebody who participated in, because this candy competition, we have to weigh to see who won the competition. So as somebody who was there weighing the candy that your squad brought in, it's unbelievable. I mean, the smell in the room from the candy is just nauseating because you guys bring in pounds and pounds and pounds. And, this whole time we've been hearing about you and we've been hearing your stories. And I think the one theme that we can, and Chris, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is you bring your genuine character into everything that you do. And it shows. Even on the civilian side, we see the hard work that you put in to bring that in everything that you do. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it. I have to go back over there, so I can't let you just blow me up like that, because I'll never hear the end of it. So what we do as lieutenants or as captains is you're just pushing the movement, but it's the officers that are doing it. It's the officers that are participating. It's the officers that's buying candy. It's the officers that are going to Shop with a Cop. And you see it coming up. We had a new hire a couple years ago named Marissa Wilson. She got huge into Shop with a Cop this past year. I was out with my wife, so I wasn't able to participate. And I said, hey, if anybody can pick it up while I'm gone, my sergeant and my corporal picked it up. But then they had line officers that were like, well, I'll help organize. I'll help go do whatever. My Sergeant Ortiz Cruz, he was in there, and he's like, I'll take care of it while you're gone. And that's what makes a difference to me is, if I'm gone, does it keep going? Because eventually, I'm 22, 23 years into my career. eventually I'm going to be gone.
Sure.
But I want to see that somebody behind me is still doing it. And it's so impressive to see the youth come up behind us and still want to participate, still want to do it. And that's what really drives me, because I don't want to fail them. You know, we're here for our officers, and if we fail them, you know, I had a couple supervisors over my career that I was like, man, I don't want to be like that. I want to grow up and do this. So I want them to see that and say, you know, when I grow up, that's what I want to be. I want to be part of this.
Yeah, you really do a great job over there. And I know a lot of the names that you've mentioned, they all do a great job too.
For sure.
And I think, you know, you said it yourself, you've been here 23 years or so. At some point, you have to pass the baton, to somebody else. But I think that the fact that you've been here for 23 years or something like that, and the people ahead of you have been here for 23 years or something like that, it kind of sends the message, and that's really where I want to wrap the show up, because we're a long show today. We've been over 30 minutes here. I want to wrap it up with, corrections is a tough job. It really is. And the fact that you guys have 2 decades plus in, and the people around you have 2 decades plus in, means that you're doing something right over there. In a job that a lot of people would look at and say, ain't no way, you guys are doing it for a career, and it's a lasting thing. So I think that it's a cool message to send to anybody who's thinking, you know, I wondered if I could do a job working at a jail or in a prison or in corrections of some kind. You can. You absolutely can. And there are people like Lieutenant Nuzum sitting across from me here, and a lot of the names that he mentioned that will help you through that. So if you're thinking about that, if that's a career that you're considering, anybody listening right now, give our recruiter a call, talk to him. You can find out anything you need to know. We'd be happy to share that information, but make that step, take the call, and let's get things moving for you in that direction. So one more thing. We always end the show on a positive note. So I'll let G ask it. Go ahead, G.
This is probably one of my favorite questions. So can you share with us just a positive story, something that might have happened years ago, just something that has stuck with you over the course of your career?
So there's a bunch. I mean, there are several good stories. There's some feel-good stories in there. We were locked in for a hurricane. For those of you that are listening that don't know, we're emergency responders as well, so we get locked in for the hurricane in the jail until we're cleared, and it's stressful. I mean, you don't know what's going on at your own house. You don't know what's going on in the community because you're locked in a building, and the inmates are scared, and we're scared. You know, it just is what it is. And I remember being locked in, and I wasn't happy to be there. And Lieutenant Christensen was our supervisor, and he sat us down, me and our 2 corporals. I was a sergeant at the time, and he said, hey, we're going to get through this, but we need to be there for our officers. We've been here 20 years. We know what's going to happen. We know we're not going to be home. We're ready for what we're going to do. And there were some scary times. We lost power. We had some flooding issues. We had CERT team in the units at times. We had CERT teams in the hallways at times. And it was a rough couple weeks. And people lost their homes. People lost their lives. And I'm not comparing it to that. But for this story, we make it out the other side. People show some real leadership. There was some real leadership. Like, they say calm seas never made a sailor. This was rough seas trying to get through this. And some people shined and some people didn't. And it really made it apparent who was ready and who wasn't. And Lieutenant Christensen, true to his word, he went up front and he said, hey, during this emergency, this person, man, they were great. They were fantastic. And a lot of people say that. I'll look out for you, I'll tell your story, but then it doesn't happen. And he did. And, they ended up coming back to us and talking to us and saying, hey, you guys really showed leadership. You guys really stuck it out there for people. And all of us ended up promoted that were on that squad. And that lieutenant, Christensen, that looked out for us and helped us and guided all of us, we still go back to him. And we're like, hey, if we're having a bad day, if we're having a rough decision that you don't know, all of us that come up together, come back to him and said, hey, you've always been a mentor to us. You've really looked out for us. Thank you for everything you did. He had some major issues during the hurricane, and it was fantastic. And he has truly been a friend to us and a leader to all of us, and he continues to be. So
That's awesome.
Yep.
I love that.
Having those bonds that you make with the people that you work with every day. They always say your work family is sometimes closer than your actual family, and I think that that's just because you spend so much time
You
together.
do.
You're talking 12-hour shifts over there.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool that you can make those bonds and build those connections that will last lifetimes.
For sure.
So again, those listening, this is the kind of place that you want to have your career. You want to have those kinds of connections, things that can be a mentor to you or a leader to you, and hopefully you can do that for someone else as well. So thanks for joining us for Patrolling in Paradise, the podcast. We're going to let this one close the door. Hold on, check this out. I got a new sound effect. Ready? This is going to close the door on today's conversation. Got a little jail cell door there for you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Patrolling in Paradise, the official podcast of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Lieutenant Nuzum. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.